everybody. Welcome to Live Blessed TV. I'm Romonica Jones, and I am your host. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am so grateful to have you here. Want to introduce the show and let you know that here at Live Blessed TV, we take great pride in mixing our therapeutic tools with our faith in God to make sure that you are healed, whole, and made anew. Many of you already know that I am a licensed counselor, so that comes natural for me. That is, of course, my nature. In addition, we are going to start a 3-part series today entitled The Making of a Queen. Well, today we're going to tackle that first segment of The Making of a Queen. And of course, it's talking about my life story, how God literally called me out of obscurity. He called me out of a very turbulent childhood, and he just literally just gave me life and gave me purpose and just shot me into my destiny from a places of ashes, complete ashes, all the way to beauty. So how else can I introduce myself to you other than just sharing my life story to you and opening up my heart at the very hopes that you might find your truth, that you might actually find the queen in you, to understand that not every queen comes from a well-to-do family or a family that's making 6 figures or a family that is middle class. Not every family come from two-parent households, or where, the parents work or the children are in extracurricular activities. Some queens are built from the ground, just like Esther was. Esther, both her mom and her dad had passed away. The only thing about that is that in today's society, sometimes you feel defeated based on where you've come from. You feel defeated based on what you've gone through. You feel defeated based on what you don't have compared to what other people have. Well, I am here today to let you know that God took nothing, and miraculously out of that nothing, he made something. Just how he formed the earth. When he looked at the earth was void, without form. And even though it was void, without form, he created the earth that we now live in, drive to work in, go to school in, visit churches in, have museums in. He visited all of that from a place that was void and without form. So I want to let you know today that if you're in a situation, even right now, where maybe you've not gotten your GED diploma yet, or maybe, you're a single parent at home and you're taking care of your children and you live in a single parent household. Maybe your house was much like mine as a child, dysfunctional and turbulent. That does not mean that you have to stay there. That does not mean that God does not have a calling on your life that will allow you to reach the masses. That does not mean that you do not have purpose. That does not mean that you do not have value. That means that God is getting ready to do something in your life that's going to blow your mind, and he's the only person that's going to be able to get glory out of that situation. So we're going to just jump right in. And many of you already know, of course, I am a licensed counselor. Grew up in the household. And this part of the segment is going to talk about Egypt, okay? So you might find yourself in this place called Egypt. Egypt in the Bible represents a place of bondage, okay? We know that the children of Israel, when they lived in Egypt, they were under Pharaoh's care, right? So they were dealing with a person, Pharaoh, that had them basically tilling the ground, that had them making bricks without straws, that was basically had them in bondage. And when you're in a bondage situation, whether it's child abuse, whether it's physical abuse, whether you do not have a job and so your finances is in bondage, right? Whether your marriage is going through problems, so your marriage is in bondage. Whether you're having issues with your children, being able to stay focused, being able to pay attention, being able to find positive influences. So right now, your relationship with your child might be in bondage. When you're in a place called Egypt, a place of bondage, not only is your physical body in bondage, but a lot of times your mind, come on somebody, is in bondage. Your emotions are in bondage. Sometimes your will, you're trying to go the wrong direction, so your will is in bondage. So I want to share my story, my Egypt experience as a part of this Making of the Queen series with you, so that you can identify yourself, to know that even in your place of bondage, our God is able to give you beauty for your ashes. He's able to turn your pain into your gain. He's able to turn your misery into your miracle. He is able to turn things around if you believe on him, if you call on him, if you have faith in him. He is the God I am. And so that means it doesn't matter what you're dealing with. It doesn't matter who stayed. It doesn't matter who left. It doesn't matter what you had or what your parents did not have. If you have God, you have the majority. If you have God, you have more than what you need, because he is able to take your little bit and he's able to multiply that, and he's able to turn that into a mountain. You hear me? And not a mountain standing against you, but a mountain working for you, because that will be the force of the size of the breakthrough and the miracle and the promise that he's able to deliver into your life. But you have to believe him for it. So opening up, just to tell you just a little bit about me. Many of you all know that my name, Monica, means counselor, right? Well, the amazing thing about that, and yes, many of you all will also find out that we have a counseling agency in 2 different locations, one in New Orleans, one in Baton Rouge. Many of you all will know that I have a master's degree in psychological counseling, and went to school and got educated, but it did not start that way. My career decision to go into counseling not only, of course, was provoked by my name being Monica, but mainly it was provoked because my mom was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenic. So even as a child, we would be in the house and we would hear her, talking to herself. We would hear her going back and forth. And I learned in those early stages of my life the inner workings of mental illness. I learned about schizophrenia and bipolar. I learned more about those things living at home with my mom than what I could have ever learned in a university, than what I could have ever learned in a textbook, than what I could have ever learned while I was studying school to become a licensed counselor in our psychology field. So it was in that time that we would go through so much. My mom would physical abuse us. There was days that we did not have food. There was days that she would not allow us to go to school. There was days that our family would make fun of us and talk about us, because not only when you're going through that situation called Egypt, when you're in a place of physical bondage and mental bondage and emotional bondage, not only is it a weight for you to bear, but sometimes it's a weight for the people around you to bear. Sometimes not everybody is equipped to deal with your Egypt. Not everybody is equipped to encourage you and to motivate you. Not everybody even know God the way that they should, to be able to stand in the hedge and to stand in the gap for you. So it was during that time when we suffered just tremendous physical abuse. Some days there was food in the house. Some days there was not food in the house. And of course, I would go back and forth, and I would be the child. I was the third child, right? And so my mom, I later found out that my mom had already had, of course, her daughter. She had already had her son. So for me, I was the third child. I was the black sheep that she really did not prepare for, that she really did not want. So I also dealt with rejection. So by her already having her son and daughter, it was like I was almost, for her, extra baggage as a single parent. And so I took the brunt of those physical abuse sessions, if you might say. I took the brunt of the verbal abuse and the emotional abuse. I really was like the real live Cinderella that was getting kicked around. And I'm not just sharing that with you because I need your pity. Come on, somebody, because when I tell you God made a way, I'm sharing that with you because you might feel like you're the child that was never wanted. You might feel like you are the child that was always misunderstood. You might feel like you are the child that was always thrown to the side, that was left to the side, and maybe even kicked out as the black sheep of your family. And so if you have ever dealt with that, or even if you've dealt with domestic violence where your mother may not be fighting on you, but you've dealt with so much rejection and low self-esteem where you have attracted partners or relationships, and we're going to get to that part in the other pieces of the series, so we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But if you've dealt with abuse in other relationships outside of your parental relationships, I want you to know that God is still able to turn that thing around and still give you beauty for your ashes. He can change your story. He can remove people in your life. He can remove people out of your life. He can move the chessboard and literally work that thing in your favor. The danger about being in Egypt is that oftentimes we are ashamed of our Egypt experience. Oftentimes we are embarrassed of our Egypt experience. Some people have maybe even dealt with molestation, and you never opened up to anybody. You never got the help that you needed. You never talked about the abuse that was in your marriage, or the infidelity that was in your marriage, or the physical abuse that was in your childhood or from your parents' home, or dealing with mental illness or depression or divorce. Many of us learn at an early age to sweep those things under the rug because they're not perfect. And we live in a society where we fake perfection. We understand that every last one of us have had a Egypt situation. Every last one of us have had a bondage scenario where we were in physical bondage, maybe even emotional, spiritual bondage, and all of the above. However, whenever we cover these things up, number one, we don't allow ourselves the true healing that we deserve. You need somebody to shine a light on that situation. I later came to understand, though I was carrying the shame of my mother's mental illness, I later came to understand that her bondage and her baggage was not my baggage. I later came to understand that her mental illness had nothing to do with me. I later understood that it was important for me to give her back the weight of her mental illness. Yes, she birthed a child. My name is Monica. Monica means counselor. And yes, I've opened up several counseling agencies, 2 to be exact, and will be more. However, even with that being said, if I had not overcome the shame of my Egypt experience, then I would still be weighed down under that guilt, under that shame, under that oppression. It is not until we're able to face the truth of our situation that God will give us the strength and the power and the ability to be able to overcome it. You cannot overcome anything that you are in denial about. Therapy will tell you that. Come on, somebody. If you're in denial about that molestation, if you're in denial about that physical abuse, if you're in denial about that rejection or that mental illness, well then, of course, and a lot of us get in denial, let's just say this, because we don't want other people to judge us. We don't want to look like we're the only person going through problems. Well, you got to get to a place in your life where you do not care or value the opinion of other people as much as you value your freedom from bondage, as much as you value your breakthrough from Egypt. Because whatever you do not confront, you will not be able to overtake. You will not be able to conquer. So when the enemy give you this shame and this guilt, you have to give it back to him and understand that we're not wrestling with flesh and blood. All those years ago when my mother was physically abusing us, we were not wrestling with my mother per se. We were wrestling with spirits and principalities in high and wicked places that was trying to cause that generational curse to repeat itself. But the way that God empowered us to be able to break that generational occurs is, number one, I would contact police authorities. So yes, we get moved out of the house. Sometimes we get moved back into the house. Sometimes the police would come and the police would go and would leave us there. But when I would call on a higher authority, being the police, and when that did not work, I then had to take this thing from the physical realm, the natural realm, and I had to place it in the spiritual realm. Come on, somebody. I had to begin to fight in the spirit. And the way I would fight in the spirit is I would take it to Jesus. I would take it to an authority that was even higher than the police. And I would literally feel the Holy Spirit comforting me. I would literally feel a weight that would be lifted. I would literally feel where God would open up a door and would allow us to be removed for even a period of time for us to get a break before we were permanently removed altogether. So I want to encourage you right now that no matter how bad your situation is, no matter the shame and the guilt that you've been carrying, no matter the rejection or the depression or the oppression that have settled in because of your abusive circumstances or situations, you never have to be too ashamed to take it to God. You never have to be too ashamed to be able to bow a knee and say, God, this is what is going on in my life. He is our Father. If he loved us enough to send his son Jesus to die on the cross for us, then surely he is moved about the feelings of our infirmities. Surely he has compassion for the weight that we carry and the burdens that is on our shoulders, even while we're in our Egypt situation. So I would have you to know right now that if you're in that situation, pray about it, because nobody and nothing can change it the way that God can. Sometimes there is an inner guilt because we feel like, well, maybe we put ourselves in this situation. But I want you to know that God, Jesus Christ, died on the cross that you might live life more abundantly. So even if you feel like you put yourself in that situation, Jesus still died that you might be able to get out of that situation. So don't allow the guilt to hold you there. Do not allow the shame to hold you there. Do not allow the rejection to hold you there. While I was in that Egypt situation with my siblings and I, of course, you guys, not only was there physical bondage, as I stated before, but then those things of rejection would come up. Come on, somebody. Those things of low self-esteem would come up. Those things of deep insecurity will come up. Because anytime you live in a household where love is not fostered, anytime you live in a household, come on somebody, where love is not the temperature of the day or the set temperature of atmosphere in your home, when you're dealing with physical abuse, you have the opposite of love. So that means you're actually dealing with hate, which means you're dealing with self-hate. You're dealing with sabotage. You're dealing with rejection. You're dealing with low self-esteem. You're dealing with insecurity. So all of those things will play on your identity. All of those things will come against your purpose. All of those things will play on the different relationships that you get involved with, or the different friendships that you involve yourself with, because of that root of rejection and needing to be accepted, or because of that root of low self-esteem, or because of that root of anger. Anytime you're involved in a domestic violence situation or physical abuse, the anger from your aggressor will begin to settle in you. So I found the manifestation of those things playing out in my life. I found me struggling with insecurity because I was bearing the weight of my mother's mental illness. I found me struggling with rejection and finding relationships where I was looking for acceptance in all of the wrong places. When you are going through those things physically in your bondage in Egypt, those things will cross over into your emotions. And before you know it, your mind is just as bound as your physical body is. Your mind don't think that you're good enough. Your mind don't think that you're smart enough. Your mind don't think that you come from the right background. Your mind is always saying to you, as it was for me, I always thought that other people could not relate to me because maybe they didn't go through the childhood that I went through. I thought maybe they could not relate to me because they didn't come from, a single parent household where their parents was mentally ill. So I always thought that I was the outcast. So I would recreate that situation at my jobs. I would recreate that outcast situation in my relationships, in my friendships. And so I had to go through a process. Number one, and I know you guys are probably asking, well, what in the world does this have to do with the making of a queen, right? Well, you have to understand this, that if you're ever going to become a queen and emerge into the true purpose and the true destiny that God has called you to emerge in, if you're ever going to overcome that physical abuse, that profanity, the fact that maybe you didn't get a GED, the fact that maybe you don't know how to read, the fact that maybe you did suffer from a divorce, the fact that, yes, you did become a single parent and that's not what you had in mind. If you're ever going to overcome those things that placed us in bondage, if you're ever going to overcome those things, you have to be able to identify it. You have to be able to look at it and know the truth about it. You cannot overcome it if you don't identify it. So part of the making of the Queen series is being able to stand in your truth, being able to take responsibility, or being able, even in my case, to say, wait a minute, to acknowledge it's not my fault that my mom was mentally ill. It is not my fault. You understand that she would not take her medicine and she would physical abuse us. But even as a queen, not only are you going to identify your truth, whether good or bad, whether wrong or right, but the next thing that you're going to do is try to find purpose even in your Egypt situation. My goodness, even though the children of Israel was in Egypt, they still found a Moses that was born in Egypt. There is still something, a gift placed in the inside of you, because we know that the name Moses means to be drawn out, right? So there is still a gift that God can use in the inside of you that will draw you out of Egypt. There might be a person that God will assign to you that will draw you out of Egypt. So even in my case, you guys, the next step after you identify your truth is to be able to find purpose in it. In my case, of course, my mom had named me Monica, Romonica, by the way. Monica means counselor. So I began to understand that God had called me to be a counselor. How did he introduce me to that role? Well, eventually when my mom would finally go to the mental health clinic, she would take us with her. And this is after the Child Protective Services would get involved and a family social worker would be assigned to the family. So at that point, you guys, we would, schedule an appointment with her psychologist. And I went into that office and I just felt the peace and the love of God. And I looked at how that man, that psychologist, cared for my mother's well-being. He did not judge her. He did not judge her children. He did not put her down. He had love and he had compassion. And right there, even in the midst of my Egypt situation, even in the midst of my storm where I would spend a lot of nights just crying and wailing out before the Lord to turn things around for me, right then and there, he gave me a snapshot of my future. And I knew when I saw that psychologist that one day I would sit on the other end of that desk. One day I would be the person that would help other families. One day I would be the person that would encourage and affirm other single parents, whether it's a single mother or a single dad. One day I would be sitting on the other side of that desk helping other people cope with their mental illness, whether it was because they fought in war or whether it was because mental illness was just a generational curse. And so when you are in your Egypt, look for the clues. My gosh, just like Moses, look for the burning bush, because your Egypt, your bondage situation will not last always. But you cannot become a victim in your Egypt. You cannot get stuck in your Egypt. At some point, you have to say, God, what is it that you want me to take out of this situation? What gift are you going to open up that's going to make enough room for me to escape, so that when I do escape, I will be able to give you all of the praise. I will be able to give you all of the glory, and I will be able to give you all of the honor. Understanding that if it had not been, my gosh, for the Lord that was on my side, it was not my mother's psychologist that brought us out. It was not the family social worker that brought us out. It was not our family, so to speak. Our family did help us, but they were not the initiators of what brought us out. But it was God that lifted up his mighty arm and finally vindicated us. And by that time, I had gotten enough training in mental illness to serve the purpose and the destiny that he had named me while I was yet in my mother's womb, that I would stand before you and be the counselor, even to the nations that he had called me to be. Thank you so much for seeing you. See you on the next time, series part 2. I'm Romonica Jones, CEO of Eclectic Counseling Services, here to give you your personal invitation to give an assessment so we can provide an assessment for you for whatever mentor services that you might need, whatever counseling services that you might need. Maybe you're at home feeling alone. Maybe there is a void or the death of a loved one that you're suffering with. Maybe there's a history of bipolar or schizophrenia, anxiety, fear, ADHD, you name it. We're here to provide comfort and services with you even in this hour. We have 2 locations, 16305 Elysian Fields Avenue in New Orleans, Louisiana. Our second location is 7707 Waco Avenue in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Give us a call so we can do a free assessment at 504-265-0996. That's 504-265-0996. We've worked with court systems, school systems. We visit the client holistically. We provide career counseling. We have Medicaid services available for you. And if you have no insurance at all, we're just here to serve you and love you back to life. Thank you for tuning in to Live Blessed Global Ministries. I would like to give you a great opportunity. That opportunity is our partnership for membership, where we are asking you to donate $1 a week. That is a total of $4 a month. We do understand that we have a world out here to win, as our ministry is on radio as well as TV. We would like for you to join in and take on your role and play your part as we win the world and save the world to Jesus. Thank you. Living my life like it's